I want to thank everybody here for presenting a player. Everybody did them justice. We have just now voted 5 people off, and these are all great players. They're all people who will be back next year, I'm sure. Here are the 5 who we have removed: Darren Woodson, Steve Wisniewski, Dwight Freeney, Kevin Williams, and Torrey Holt. And here are our 10 remaining finalists who we will debate, and we're going to debate all of them, discuss them all, move fast with a focus on who needs to get in tonight, and then we're going to have a vote and announce the Not in the Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame class of 2024. So at the top, these are by votes on who to remove. So we were looking to remove 5. So Woodson, Wiz, Freeney, Williams, and Holt were removed. With 5 votes, Ricky Waters and Tom Nalen. With 4 votes, Tim McDonald, Leslie O'Neill, and Richmond Webb. With 3 votes, Eric Allen, Andre Johnson, and first ballot, Julius Peppers, which, again, the way that we look at it, it's okay if you don't get in your first year. And with 0 votes, no one voted to kick them out, Randall Cunningham and Antonio Gates. So these are our 10. I am going to drop them into the chat so that our group can all see them. And the floor is open. Again, what we are focused on here is who needs to stay, who can go, who feels strongly about someone staying, who feels strongly about someone going. Keep it quick, keep it sharp. And Bill Carroll, why don't you kick us off?
So the 2 that got no votes, can we just kind of push them?
No.
No. Oh, we can't. Okay.
Can I suggest something else?
All right, then.
Start with the year 20.
Got it. Oh, okay.
It's not going to be start with anybody. You can start by telling us what you want, but it's just going to be a straight vote.
Okay.
So
got it.
So pump your guys. Go for it.
Yeah.
Bill?
So I'm going to say, let's start with the year 20 guys. Tim McDonald. And when I hear there were several people that voted to eliminate him, it kind of concerns me because it was the top safety that was eligible. We are talking about a year 20 guy. When you talk about the statistics, he not only measures up, but he exceeds a number of the recent Hall of Famers that were put in. And I know for our group, this is the first year I think we've really, truly talked about him and honed in on him. But when I think about some of the other players that we've inducted, Tim McDonald certainly feels like he meets the bar just based off of his own play combined with how he measures up against his peers. He was the guy that I would pound the table for the most. And
I'll say actually, Jeff, I'm really interested to hear from people on people they didn't present, because we know how passionate everybody is. And I will say, and I'll just hang myself out to dry, I voted to remove Leslie O'Neill. And I like Leslie O'Neill a lot. I've thought about Leslie O'Neill a lot, but this was a really, really hard bracket, a really, really hard ballot. And when I got right down to it, I said, do I need to hear more about Leslie O'Neill? I feel okay. I'm also not someone who's trying to put in Dwight Freeney, Robert Mathis, Jared Allen. I've got some other pass rushers I'm interested in. So I feel like I know where my personal line is. Who else? And I'm one of them with Jeff. I joined Jeff, and Tim McDonald is a yes for me. But who else feels passionate one way or the other about Tim McDonald? I mean, jump right in. Go ahead.
Yeah, Bill.
Bill, take it.
All right, Bill.
When I do my work on safeties, particularly safeties that fit that sort of strong safety mold, I have him nestled between a guy who has been for quite some time in Ken Houston, and a guy that, some other time we'll talk about in Richie Pettibone, who invented the position of strong safety. But Tim McDonald is a big, powerful athlete, first of all, right? When you see him on the hoof, when you watch him in person, or if you didn't see him in person, you watch him on, on film or tape, whatever, you notice he looks almost like a will linebacker, but he's a really good athlete. He can cover. He hits like a ton of bricks, and he's super smart, right? A super smart guy. I feel like he gets lost in the sauce a little bit. One, because as I think was mentioned already, he's not playing for teams. Well, part of his career, he's not playing for teams people care about. Now, obviously, the 49ers are a team people cared about, But the Arizona Cardinals, in the era that he played for them, were not a team that people tended to care about, including for a while there, even the Arizona Cardinal fans didn't seem to really care that much. I mean, they were very famously sort of like with the Chargers now, where you go on there on Sunday and be like, 87% whoever they were playing against. Chicago would pack it out there. Dallas particularly, oh God. I mean, it was a home game for Dallas when they played against the Cardinals in those days. But Tim McDonald was a guy that could do literally everything that you could ever ask a safety to do. He was a terrific safety blitzer. He was great against the run. He was terrific against the pass. I mean, I think nowadays, particularly, we would really have a good sense, because especially as the game is, very often you have three safeties on the field at the same time. He would be the guy that was the best of the three, no matter who the other two safeties are. But more importantly, he'd be the guy that never came off the field, right? There would never be a situation where you'd say, oh, we got to get Tim McDonald off the field, because in short yards and goal line, he's going to be a guy that's going to come up and fill a running back trying to get in. Or if a quarterback's so brave as to try to go over the top, bam, right? He's going to go back the other way. I don't know why he hasn't gotten more love from the quote unquote real Hall of Fame. He's an insanely good football player.
I love quote unquote. That's special.
Yes, I felt it was called for.
That was good. Hold on, Bill. I want to jump in because I know we've got some.
Please do.
Guys, and we already have McDonald feeling pretty good. Who has something strong to say about our other 20-year man, Leslie O'Neal? Because Jeremy presented him. He did a great job. Thank you very much. Who's got something powerful to say about O'Neal?
I do. I just throw out with this. When I compare him to Jared Allen, for all the talk about, like, at his peak, Jared Allen was certainly great as a pass rusher. But I look at and I say, we just eliminated the guy who I thought was the better defensive lineman during that time in Minnesota, all around, in my opinion, was Kevin Williams, and by a bit of a measure. When I look at Leslie O'Neal, he not only was a great pass rusher, he was really good against the run. He could offer you something in coverage. He was a guy that was a Pro Bowler at multiple positions, talking about as a 3-4 outside linebacker and a 4-3 defensive end. I want to emphasize again that 94 Chargers team that went to the Super Bowl, they were getting there behind Stan Humphries at quarterback, and Natron Means and Marion Butts and Papunu as the H-back. This was not some, killer team that went, right? It was Junior Seau and it was Leslie O'Neal.
I guess, Jeff, this is what I would ask you. We have shown very definitively that we're not terribly interested in Jared Allen. And maybe if this group is still around in 5, 6, 7, 8 years, we're going to get to him. But as of right now, there has been no push to put Jared Allen in. So, Kevin Williams, we're way ahead of everybody else in Kevin Williams. We're going to get to Kevin Williams. I think it was probably just a year's thing because the ballot was so stacked. So my question is, if we're treating this, and this is always our questions about these exercises that we do you do it as an exercise to influence, or do you do it as an exercise for what we want to do? We're not voting in Jared Allen right now. So how does Leslie O'Neal compare to our world?
Well, I'd say technically Jared Allen's in the top 10. So I wouldn't take it for granted that we wouldn't, right? And when you look right now, Jack, I just want to correct you on one thing. He was one of the 5 fewest removed votes. So I want to be clear, like, I don't think that's accurate, because you listed Cunningham and Gates had none. The way order you listed them, and Jared Allen was top 5 fewest votes.
Jared Allen's not in this.
It's Eric Allen.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Remember, we're the group that doesn't like Jared Allen. Sorry, Jared Allen. I'm kidding, Jared Allen. Don't come to my home.
I once spoke for Jared Allen in this forum. He got a finalist 1 year before, and I tried to.
I like Jared Allen. I just don't need to get to Jared Allen right now.
Yeah,
so my question
left out by me, but
that's okay.
But I think about Leslie O'Neal though.
Yeah, on his own terms.
Yeah, so on his own terms.
Or on our terms. Yeah.
On our terms. You've got a combination of high level play for an extended period of time, combined with very late eligibility. If I'm not mistaken, he was also one of our top 5 returning vote getters from last year.
I think
Randall,
that's right.
Andre Johnson, Leslie O'Neal.
I'd have to check it, but yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, so we have shown some love to him in this process before. It was actually Tim McDonald that felt like a much larger course correction this year, similar to Alvin Lewis last year.
I agree with that.
And the challenge is am I here to sit there and say that Julius Peppers doesn't belong as a first ballot Hall of Famer, not necessarily, right? And I feel like for us, it'd be hard to take us seriously if we don't vote for either Peppers or Gates as a first ballot. My personal
Right. That
ballot,
was the point that Ron had been making.
yeah, like my bias here is if I was going to choose between two really great players between Gates and Peppers, I might lean a little more towards Gates. Maybe that's a bit of offensive bias. It's also a bit of bias towards you have a lot fewer tight ends than you have pass rushers in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So from a representation standpoint, I could live with a Julius Peppers waiting 1 year to get a Leslie O'Neal in now and putting an Antonio Gates in as the first ballot guy.
Okay. Anybody else who wants to speak up on behalf of Leslie O'Neal? I mean, I was very, I don't know. I just cut this ballot a lot of ways, and I don't know. I could go back and forth.
Yeah, I'll say something
hey.
super quick, very simple. I'm sorry, whoever I just cut off.
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
We're talking about Freeney. We were talking about him earlier, and we can mention, Mathis, who he was teaming up with. We talked about Jared Allen. We're talking about Kevin Williams here. Just name the other defensive lineman that Leslie O'Neal had with the Chargers. You know what I mean? He did a lot of this damage, being the main focal point for a lot of offenses when they went against. And then obviously they had a key on, like Junior, and later on Ronnie Harrison came in. But on the defensive line, it was Leslie O'Neal, and he was providing that pass rush for the Chargers. And I don't know. He put up a lot of numbers. He had a lot of sacks, and again, he was getting a lot of these double teams and things like that. So, I just look at it that way too.
I was thinking about, what has caused Leslie O'Neal to fall and to not, we've had him in, and I was thinking, someone who would have been a huge advocate for him would have been Junior Seau. You have to imagine that at all these dinners and all these events every year, that Junior Seau would have been someone who would have been saying, hey guys, pulling the coat, hey, like Ron's had with the stories of, hey, Joe Thomas or whoever else. And so Junior Seau's gone. That 94 Chargers team has had a lot of terrible, tragic deaths. But who was their coach? It was Bobby Ross, right? I mean, Bobby Ross, I don't hear a lot from him. I mean, he's not in the hall, so he's not someone who's got, there's just.
Their GM Bobby Beathard.
Well, Bobby Beathard would be the one.
I think to your point, here's where I think it hurts. The Chargers are a team without a home. They technically play in LA. Every game is a road game, meaning all that history is attached to San Diego. And there's probably a lot of San Diego people that are kind of irritated and pissed off. Yeah, I don't even think when you talk about social media, Ron brought up a great point earlier about the Bengals and the great work that they do. Talk about that fan base to advocate for some of their players. I can't recall seeing much about Leslie O'Neal. Even when the list of 25 was getting ready to come out, there was hype about Antonio Gates. There was not a single mention of Leslie O'Neal. That stuff matters.
Yeah,
if the franchise doesn't care.
Yeah, and Jeff, to your point, it's recency. They know Antonio Gates. They've seen him making spectacular plays. Leslie O'Neal, I mean, if you go back to the 90s, it is what it is. And just to add one other point for those watching for context, we were talking about Jared Allen and Dwight Freeney. In our cut down to 15, I believe Freeney made the cut over Allen, and that was part of the logic there.
Yeah. Hey, here's another issue. You mentioned a place without a home. The Chargers, I don't know him. Does anyone know Eric Williams? Because he's the Chargers presenter, but he's an LA guy. And that's a problem with these teams that move, that you have to have someone who's able to present from effectively a different city.
Yeah, no, Jack. He's covered the NFL for quite a long time.
I'm not saying he can't. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just noting it's a different city. Oh yeah.
Eric Williams has covered the Chargers for a long time.
Yeah, he goes back to San Diego.
Okay. Well, that's why I asked, because it does seem like a possible issue. Okay, let's talk.
I just want to make one comment before I don't have passion about anybody in particular, but other than Tom Nalen, of course, but I'm not going to talk about him. I just want to make one comment about, if you look at and it's not the perfect, like you said, it's not the perfect gauge, but we look at the Pro Football Hall of Fame monitor, and we have a running back and a couple defensive backs on here that are way down that list. We've got like the 45th, the 50th, the 60th defensive back, and like the 30th running back. Do we really want to put the 30th, the 45th, the 50th best at their position according to that, when we have plenty of people who players on who are like top 15, top 10, top 5? Just something to think about. Do we really need that 30th best running back in the Hall of Fame? I mean, I'm just saying, like, let's consider.
I like Ricky Waters a lot. I liked him when he played. I like his numbers now. I like thinking about him in a modern context. But I liked him.
Yeah, but he wasn't in the modern context. He didn't play he played back then. That's what we have to judge him on. I'm saying
back
do
then.
we
I'm
really
during,
do we really want like to dilute running back, the wide receiver group, these things that are actually happening with the Hall of Fame, or do we want to get like some offensive linemen, some defensive linemen, some?
Do you have any offensive linemen in mind, Tom? Is there anyone that can guide us?
Well, I'm surprised that Wisniewski isn't on here. I mean, I know we're not going to talk about him, but I was stunned that he didn't make it.
Yeah, can I address the Hall of Fame monitor score? Because I think this comes back to some observation I had before. And Jackie, I'm sure you remember I sharing this with you. When you go back and look at, let's say, the 85 Bears, I think Mongo McMichael had like the same.
That's a different stat. That's AV.
I'm sorry. But it doesn't that feed into it though?
I don't know how the Hall of Fame monitor score works.
Because I'm saying
I want to. It's not a perfect tool. I just was saying someone mentioned it. I'm just saying let's put these players in context of where they stand amongst the group of players that they have to be voted against.
I'm just saying I like Ricky Waters at the time. I mean, I thought of him as, you're right, he wouldn't be top 4. He certainly wouldn't be top 4. But I liked him a lot. Let's hear, does anyone have anything to say about Eric Allen, who's another guy who's late? Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Let's speak up on him. So Eric Allen, of the 4 defensive players we have in our final 10 here, he was the one player that has the Defensive Player of the Year award in 1993.
Yep.
1993 was the year that Reggie White left the Eagles to the Packers. So he did that without having one of the best defensive players of all time helping him out. He's got 54 career interceptions. He, up until this year, held the record for most interception returns for touchdowns in the season. He's been overlooked for way too long. He's just been a solid defensive player that has made every team he's been on better. When he went to Los Angeles at the time, the Raiders?
They were Oakland.
Oakland. Okay, so he went over there. They got better on defense because he was there. So I just think that, being a year 18 guy, he's got a couple more years, and in the real voting, he's finally getting his day in court. I think that we need to take a good, long, hard look at him as one of those guys coming up to their running out of the time on the modern era here. We don't want to lose him to the senior abyss like we did last year with Albert Lewis.
Well, we voted in Albert Lewis.
We did.
We did.
Yeah, we did the actual committee.
The quote unquote Hall of Fame in quote unquote Canton, Ohio. They do things their own way.
I do. He's the one guy on here that I kind of went in here with a little not as strong on. He wasn't originally in my top 5, but after listening to all the presentations tonight, he's moved up my list, and he's definitely right there at pushing for a top 5 spot for me.
Eric Allen. All right. I'll say this about a few guys. One, I've pointed it out. The center position bugs the hell out of me. I always look at like how far back do you have to go? And again, we're not the Hall. I always look at like how far back do you have to go to get to 5 players in a position group? You have to go back to 1987 to get 5 centers, unless you count Bruce Matthews, and then it's not quite as far, but it's still way farther than any other position. Tight end, same problem. You look at like how many tight ends in the 90s are in compared to how many quarterbacks. I think it's 10-1. I think Sharp is the only one. Now we've got Gonzalez. Gates will go. So Gates isn't as big of a deal. Nalen is a big deal. I like the idea of Nalen, number one, because of the reasons that Tom says. Number two, because if he played a different position, we wouldn't be debating him, quite frankly, because he was at the top. We would be talking about Nalen and Krutz and Saturday and Burke, and there'd be a number of guys there. So the thing I do like about our group is that we do honor late round guys, so it's not as big of a problem, but I like the idea of putting Nalen in sooner than later because it just sort of puts us ahead of the curve. And
Would
I
you
don't
put
know,
him ahead of Richmond Webb though?
No, I wouldn't, because but that's me. But
Yeah, sure. That's the point.
well, they also have different years, but I don't want to have to like pit two forgotten linemen against each other. But I personally, this year, I would favor Richmond Webb. He's later in the process. The thing with Webb that I just don't understand was that throughout his entire career, he was one of those guys who was referred to as future Hall of Famer Richmond Webb. And that's something that suddenly gets forgotten. I think that there are guys who should be in the Hall of Fame who don't get that tag applied. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but I think it's worth noting that if you're watching someone at the time and you're thinking this is one of the very best of a position, and that was how it felt with Richmond Webb. His first 4 Pro Bowls were when fans were voting. I don't remember. I'd have to look it up, but he was the first rookie tackle maybe since George Kunz to start the Pro Bowl, or first rookie left tackle. I mean, he had some things like that. We mentioned Bruce Smith. Bruce Smith in 1990 had 20 sacks in 3 games against the Dolphins. He had 0.
Yeah,
I mean, the things that Richmond Webb was doing phenomenal. And so I don't want to pit offensive lineman versus offensive lineman. If I had to do it based on time, I would do Webb.
And Jack, I would just say that he had 7 consecutive Pro Bowls.
7 straight Pro Bowls, right?
Yeah.
Well,
pretty impressive.
Not just
13-year
7
career.
consecutive Pro Bowls, the first Dolphin to do so.
Interesting.
Well, I think
All right.
another case to be made for Webb, or to give for the group to give some thought as to Webb and why we might want to be thinking about him. I mean, part of our role here is, right, we can do things differently than the actual Pro Football Hall of Fame. We can be talking about players, and we're highlighting and having discussions about players who we feel are deserving, and yet the Hall voters aren't taking that same position. We can raise and elevate players that we think are deserving that the Hall voters are, to this date, ignoring. And for me, part of the case to make for Richmond Webb is exactly that. I mean, we have had some great presentations on him. I think we can all agree the resume there. I do think we have a certain role or function here to be able to raise the profile and move these guys forward and get them in the Hall. Not as sort of a message to the voters, but just to show the counter Hall that we're creating is recognizing guys. I think Kevin Williams is another guy that we're going to come back to, I think, in the next few years and do the
100%.
same thing for him.
Someone else should do the presentation on Williams getting tired.
Good to know.
Can I weigh in on Randall for a moment? I don't think we've gotten there.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Okay. I think, Jack, you hit on so many of the key points. Is when you look at him relative to his peers, he has a number of areas that he stands out among, like Jim Kelly, Warren Moon, Troy Aikman. And I'm not here to sit there and say that none of them deserve to be Hall of Famers. I am there to say it's always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. 2 points that you've made before, that those 3 guys were first ballot, and Randall sits here at whatever it is, year 18, year 19 in the process.
Every quarterback since Greasy is first ballot except for Kurt Warner.
And it took him whopping 3 times, right?
Yeah, right.
And when I think about the lack of offensive talent he had around him, Troy Aikman had Hall of Fame coach Jimmy Johnson, and a successful, even though, it didn't end well in Dallas, I guess you'd say, but Barry Switzer was an incredibly accomplished, incredibly successful coach, right? You look at Jim Kelly, he had Marv Levy, he's in the Hall of Fame. And who did Randall Cunningham have? He had Buddy Ryan, who really didn't care about the offensive side of the ball. He really didn't. And then he had Rich Kotite. Rich Kotite is the punchline. And we forget that Rich Kotite was there and kind of ruined Randall a little bit there in the 90s, right? And the one season that he got real talent around him, like consistent real talent that you could name: Carter, Moss, Reed, Robert Smith, the offensive line. It was in Minnesota. And look at that season. He was voted NEA MVP over Terrell Davis, who had a 2,000-yard season that year. And to me, we're talking about the one guy that plays the most important position in the game. And to your point, you talk about the Hall of Fame. He was the ultimate weapon for a reason. He had elite seasons at the most difficult and most important position. And you continue to feel his legacy as the years go by. For a guy that had to lead his team in rushing 4 times. I just think about that. Not only was he their passer, he had to be their leading rusher 4 times consecutively. I really hope this is the year that we finally put Randall over the top.
And Jeff, I think it goes back to the comment I made before. I think he falls into that same kind of group, right? That we are making a strong advocacy for a guy in a broader view with a different perspectives and evaluating his career in a way that the voters aren't.
So if I can speak on,
again, I'm not suggesting that we are setting a path for the voters or we're critical of the voters, but we are saying in our approach and view, we are trying to look at guys who are not getting this kind of recognition, that need to get the recognition, and making the case for them because no one else is.
And what I would say, on that note, what I would say about Tom Nalen is that, to me, it's not just that Tom Nalen's not getting the recognition, it's that centers aren't getting the recognition. So I'm on board with Tom Nalen. If all those other guys were in, then I would still be saying, after having listened to Tom these last 4 years, just being like, yeah, Tom Nalen, absolutely. But my point with Tom Nalen is it's not just about him. It's about the fact that they have set a bar that you have to be generational to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame if you play center, and you don't have to be generational to get in at many other positions. I'm trying to remember what the 5 are. It's Mawai, Matthews, Dawson. Who am I missing?
Dwight Stevenson.
Thank you.
Jim Langer.
And Jim Langer.
Is part of it that there's just one center on the field? I mean, we got 2 safeties, 3 linebackers.
You know what I always say to that? The actual Pro Football Hall of Fame, they ended Devin Hester's bid last year on the basis of snap counts. Well, if you're going to talk about snap counts, no one's on the field more than a center. Even those wonky plays that I saw, like the Patriot, I was watching a video of the Patriots doing this in 2014, where they like swapped out like all their offensive linemen for some kind of trick play. You still need the one guy who snaps the ball. So if snap counts, he puts the literal snap in snap counts. So I would, as much as I love Webb, I don't know, I could lean toward Nalen in a year. Tom, let me ask you something. Who else do you like on this ballot?
Well, Peppers for sure. I like Peppers. I think he's awesome. I do like Richmond Webb, and I like Andre Johnson. I think he deserves it. He's one of the best receivers, even though I think there's plenty of receivers on there. I think that when you look at what he did, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. So I'm not like against putting, skill players in that, because we have so many. But and then Gates, really. I mean, Gates kind of set the bar for tight ends for a while. So those are like the ones. I'm not a big fan of, some of these other players that we have on the list. So I mean, I like O'Neal too, Leslie O'Neal. I just don't know if he goes above some of these other players. But I mean, Leslie O'Neal, I really like him as well. So
Ron, I want you to share with the group what you told me, the idea about eyes, and it's something that Paul mentioned, the idea about eyes being on us and where the balance is between us doing our own thing and us having credibility.
Well, I think the credibility thing is very, very important. And also understanding what the selectors go through. We see how difficult it is. Well, actually, I'll show you my isotoners in doing it, but we see how difficult it is going from 15 to 10 or 25 to 15. This is what those folks are doing. And it's a tough decision, but the thing is, you want to make sure that it's someone who meets the eye test, who has the career accomplishments, that resonates. John McClain, I remember Peter King's Super Bowl event in Houston, saying, just shrugging his shoulders, waving his hands to an event I was at and saying, look, it's the Hall of Fame. It's not the Hall of Good. It's the greatness kind of thing. And it's important that we keep who was great. There's some of these players who did a lot of good things, a lot of great things, or maybe great moments where like they dominated for a few years here and there, but maybe not over the full career. And it's tough to differentiate. I did want to just add, like, to the previous discussion, Jeff was talking about Randall Cunningham, NEA, in terms of being MVP and some of the other stuff. Just keep in mind, Joe Klecko just was voted in to the Pro Football Hall of Fame on the basis of being Defensive Player of the Year for 1980. Where that's significant is Lawrence Taylor in his own city was the AP Defensive Player of the Year that year. But no one would question that Joe Klecko wasn't dominant in that year. So you have to be able to sift through things. And to Tom's point, Andre Johnson, I mean, Chris did a great job presenting him specific to quarterbacks, but he didn't have Marshall Faulk. He didn't have Marvin Harrison on the other side. It was just, hey, yeah, you might get a running back who does the zone blocking scheme well, like an Arian Foster, but it was just, there's Andre Johnson. Let's send 3 guys over to stop him. And he still did what he did. Plus, we have to put a wide.
Andre Johnson's one of the few people on this list who I, at one point, said that is the best player at his position. I would say Johnson, Gates, Cunningham, Peppers, Webb. Okay, maybe not one of the few. Nayland.
That's what makes it so difficult. Like, I mean, half of this, it's like, oh, why are you voting against this guy? I'm not voting against this guy. I'm voting 4 or 5 other really good players.
Yeah, and if I could,
it's like, oh, why do you hate my guy? I don't hate your guy. It's just that I think there's 5 other guys better.
If I could circle back to Ricky Waters for just a second. I know, Jack, you and I have talked extensively about this. One of the things that has bugged me the more I've dug into Waters and thought about Waters more is I feel like he's measured against the wrong group. Like, when you look at him statistically, he meets or exceeds in some areas, and some areas he might be a little below, but in the whole, like, he really does measure up very well against guys like Curtis Martin, guys like Thurman Thomas. And I feel like he's been done a bit of a disservice when he's being compared to, people that aren't even in our top 15, such as Fred Taylor and Tiki Barber and, so on and so forth. I feel like he's being measured against the wrong group, because there's that point about the peers that he faced. Yeah, look at the peers that he faced, and he was still a high-level player. He was going up against the guys like the Thurman Thomases of the world, the Barry Sanders, the Emmitt Smiths of the world, for that few-year stretch, how great touchdown Terrell Davis was, right? I mean, when you think about Ricky Waters, he was only this number of back relative to his era. Well, look at the strength of that era. Would I rather be the 6th great back in an era, let's say, or in a great era of running backs, or maybe the 2nd or 3rd best running back in a much softer, weaker era?
But I think
like to just let our viewers know, if they're interested, we had to put a group together last fall. We had an extensive discussion about the era, sort of the late 90s, early 2000s running backs. There's some great comments and discussion in there. And out of all of that, so if you go back and look at the Bucknerverse and find those videos, Ricky Waters came out looking really good in that process. So if our viewers are interested in that whole debate, there's a lot of good comments and discussion. If you go back and look at how we viewed Ricky Waters essentially against his peer, kind of going what Jeff is saying here, it's worth a good view. There's some good stuff in there.
Yeah, going back. Just again going back to, did I ever at any point in his career, and I was alive for all of Ricky Waters' career, did I ever at any point in his career think that he was one of the 3 best running backs in the league? The answer is no. I never once. Ricky Waters is a very good running back. It's the same discussion we're going to have when Eli Manning comes up. At no point in Eli Manning's career was he one of the 8 best quarterbacks in the NFL in any given season.
True.
I feel Ricky Waters is 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th best. So the 5 people who got voted out, I voted for 4 of them, and the 5th one's my guy, so Clizzo was going to vote for him. The only one who's still here is Ricky Waters. This, to me, is a list of 9 people in Ricky Waters.
Yeah, and I think that the other challenge I have with
Here's
Ricky
another
Watters
list of,
is-
hold on, here's another list of 9 people in Ricky Waters. When Barry Sanders retired, ESPN did a special, and here are the running backs they interviewed about Barry Sanders: Thurman Thomas, Emmett Smith, Terrell Davis, Walter Payton, Jim Brown, Eric Dickerson, Gale Sayers, and Ricky Waters.
Okay.
I think the other thing I want to call out here about Ricky
That
Watters.
doesn't make Ricky Waters any good.
But I agree with you, Evan. At no point did I think Ricky Waters was one of the top 3 running backs in the NFL. I agree with that.
I'm glad that Ricky Waters publishers made him available for an article in 2000. Like that, I mean, if that next person was, I don't know, just Roger Craig, would you feel different about it? I mean, Roger Craig, I think, is a significantly better player than Ricky Waters. He's not on our ballot, but if there's anyone I'm going to go, like the next running back who's eligible to me, who should be in, is Ricky Waters. Like take Sean Alexander.
So hold on. I want to address this Ricky Waters thing a little bit more. We're talking about a guy that has also some. I've dropped it in the chat earlier. We haven't mentioned it though. Like his Super Bowl performance, he had over 100 total yards in the Super Bowl and 3 touchdowns. Like that's not an insignificant thing. And in many other Super Bowls, he would have been the MVP. The year before the divisional round against the Giants, I think he went over 160 yards and had 5 touchdowns. So when you're talking about a guy that, frankly, a lot of people even forget that he played the first 3 years in San Francisco, then they forget that he's got a ring, then they forget how great he was in the Super Bowl. Like I want to make sure when we're talking about he wasn't the top 3 back in his era. Okay, maybe you don't think he was, but again, look at the era that he was in. It's a lot harder to be top 3 in his era compared to some of the other eras.
Jeff, I can't wait for you to make the argument for Julian Edelman when he comes up.
Yeah.
All right, hey guys, it's 12:18 on the East Coast.
Thanks for the reminder.
So do we want to do just now a straight silent vote, or do we want to try to?
Yes. We've gone a while here. Let's get it done.
Can I just say one thing? I think you really do need to look, kind of like what you were asking me, Jeff. Not Jeff, I'm sorry, Jack. But we need to look at like what these guys accomplished that's measurable. And I know there's differing opinions. I mean, I pitched Richmond Webb, for example, all-decade left tackle who has, in the real process, not gotten any traction, not even semifinalists among right tackles who have lesser accomplishments. So it's important that we look at what the measurable accomplishments were and stay focused on that. I think it's really, and there's some of the other guys in this grouping fall into that.
Pierce, you've been silent.
I can say one quick thing about the Pro Football Reference Hall of Fame monitor. All decades worth 25 points, first or second team, which is a staggering amount. So, the famous example is Carl Banks, and his 1 vote is equal to the same as all of Joe Montana's MVPs. And as for Darren Woodson and Tim McDonald, Ronnie Lott was all decade for 5 years. That's all he played in the 90s. 2 with the Jets, not very impressive. So
yeah, okay.
Someone could take that spot.
Okay, so let's do. Give me your class. Is that cool? I know that it's going to be confusing, but give me your class. Give me your 5, and I will plug them in, and then we'll take a nice little group picture and be on our merry way. Oh, we'll announce it obviously. So
yeah. So at this point, I'll just pause this so that way we can make it clean.
Cool.
Sound good?
Sound good. All right. Send the 5. Okay, and I will start my adding. Hi, everyone. This is Jack Silverstein, Chicago's sports historian, and I am here in the Bucknerverse to finalize, to announce, the Pro Football Hall of Fame reverse order, the not in the Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame class of 2024. And as we discussed, super difficult process, so let's get to it. Our final cut down from 10 up to 6. Ricky Waters is out. Eric Allen is out. Tim McDonald is out. Leslie O'Neill is out. And Tom Nalen is out. And your class of 2024 for the Not in the Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame class is Andre Johnson, Antonio Gates, Julius Peppers, Richmond Webb, Randall Cunningham. So some tough ones there. Ended up with 2 guys going to the senior pool. Fortunately for us, we have a senior vote, and they won't be lost forever. But they are gone for now. So thank you everyone who watched. Thank you everyone who participated. Thank you everyone who presented. And let's everybody smile. I'll take a quick picture of the survivors. Wait, where's Bill? Where's Bill? Bill. All right, what's his name? All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, cool. Well, that does it for the class of 2024. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kirk. Thank you, Evan. And we will be back for our senior vote over the summer.
Cool. Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks for the input and the process. It was great.
Presentations were dope.
Yeah.
I'm really disappointed we didn't get one of the year 20 guys in.
I'm so mad.
Yeah, like either McDonald or O'Neill. Like it would have been nice to get one of them in.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least one of them.
I agree. It's weird. I mean, because this is something that in the past, Bill said, are we just going to put in Randall and Gates? And in the past, we've done those things where we've done like a little bit more of an automatic move, or we've done like, should we do a yes, no? I don't remember how we did it with Ellard and Lewis. Now, Ellard had always been on our radar. I don't remember if we did it that way, but in the past, we had done that where we'd said, should we just isolate the 20-year guys now and make a decision on them first? And so Randall, nobody voted him out. And then he ends up in the 3-way and he gets in, but yeah, I don't know. I'm with you, Jeff, but that's them's the breaks.
The good news is at least we do get an 18 guy out of the way. So it's one longer term person.
And we only
Webb is 16.
The Webb is 16.
And in the real Hall of Fame, he's falling to 17 for next year.
Yeah.
And Willie's coming.
Well, Nalen's close. I mean, the interesting thing right now is that we're about to, in a few years, have all these like really stacked, true first ballot Hall of Fame guys up there. So this is, yeah, and we didn't really talk much about Andre Johnson. Then all of a sudden he ran away with it. He was 11 votes for Johnson.
What was the order of the top 5?
Johnson had 11, Gates had 10, Peppers had 9, Webb had 7, and then Randall, Nalen, and O'Neill had 6. McDonald had 5, Eric Allen had 4, Ricky had 1. All right, boys.
A lot of fun.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, man.
We're still recording.
All right, take care, everyone.
All right, guys.
Okay, guys.
Thank you.
All right, later.